Ethan Cross was the kind of man people whispered about in admiration. A self-made billionaire before the age of 40. He had risen from nothing to build a global empire. His name appeared on magazine covers, business stages, and the lips of aspiring entrepreneurs who dreamed of one day standing where he stood. To the world, Ethan Cross was success personified. To himself, he was untouchable. From his glass-walled office at the top of the city's tallest tower, Ethan often looked down at the streets below. Cars moved like ants. People rushed through life, and everything felt small beneath him. That view reminded him of how far he had climbed, and how much control he believed he had over his world. Ethan's mindset was simple. Money was security, power was protection, and success meant freedom from loss. He believed hardship was for the unprepared, and failure was for those who lacked discipline. Every victory reinforced his confidence, and every profit made him trust himself more. In his mind, wealth wasn't just a reward, it was proof of superiority. But success came with a cost Ethan refused to acknowledge. As his empire grew, his relationships quietly faded. Friends became business contacts. Family calls went unanswered. Conversations were reduced to transactions. Ethan told himself it was necessary. Sacrifice now, enjoy later, he often said. Yet later never came. His days were filled with meetings, negotiations, and relentless ambition. His nights were spent alone, scrolling through numbers that never seemed to satisfy him. The more he gained, the more distant fulfillment became. Still, he felt no reason to slow down, because everything was working. Ethan trusted very few people, but among them was one man, his longtime business partner, Daniel Reeves. Together, they had built the foundation of the empire. Daniel handled operations, while Ethan focused on expansion and vision. Their partnership was built on years of success and mutual benefit, or so Ethan believed. He never questioned Daniel's loyalty. After all, trust to Ethan was something earned through shared profits, not shared values. And profits had never stopped flowing. One evening, as the city glowed beneath his office windows, Ethan sat alone at his desk reviewing investment forecasts. His phone buzzed softly beside him. A message from Daniel. Ethan glanced at the screen, but didn't open it. He was busy, he was confident, and he believed nothing urgent could happen without his control. Moments later, another message arrived. Then another. Still, Ethan ignored them. If it's important, it can wait, he muttered. That night, Ethan left the office later than usual. The city lights reflected off his car as he drove home, unaware that the foundation of everything he had built was already cracking. At home, silence greeted him. A luxury penthouse, perfectly designed, perfectly empty. He poured himself a drink and stood by the window, staring at his reflection in the glass. He saw a powerful man, a winner, a man who had mastered life. But beneath that image was something unfamiliar. Fatigue, not physical exhaustion, but a deeper weariness, the kind that comes from running without knowing why. Ethan dismissed the feeling. I've earned this life, he told himself. And with that reassurance, he went to bed. But life has a way of humbling even the most confident minds. By morning, everything Ethan believed about security, control, and success would be tested, not by strangers, not by fate, but by the very system he trusted most. As Ethan slept, emails went unanswered, calls went ignored, documents were signed in silence, and the empire he believed was unshakable began to unravel. Closing reflection. When your identity is built on wealth, loss doesn't just take your money, it takes your... Ethan Cross woke up to the sound of his phone vibrating endlessly on the nightstand. For a moment, he ignored it. Years of success had trained him to believe emergencies were exaggerated. Problems could always wait a few minutes. Control, after all, belonged to him. But the vibration didn't stop. When Ethan finally reached her phone, the screen was filled with missed calls, urgent emails, and messages marked high priority. His heart tightened, not with fear, but with irritation. He sat up in bed and opened the first email. His expression froze. The message was brief. Too brief. A major investor had pulled out overnight. Funds were frozen. A deal that had been months in the making had collapsed without warning. Ethan scrolled quickly. Another email, another withdrawal, another red alert. His chest tightened as irritation turned into disbelief. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. Ethan jumped out of bed and paced the room, calling his assistant. No answer. He called Daniel. Straight to voicemail. For the first time in years, uncertainty crept into Ethan's thoughts. He dressed quickly and left his apartment without finishing his coffee. The city outside felt different. Louder, faster, less obedient. By the time he reached his office, the atmosphere had changed. Employees whispered in hallways. Phones rang unanswered. Faces that once reflected confidence now showed quiet panic. Ethan walked straight to the conference room. "I want answers," he said sharply. But answers were scarce. Minutes later, his legal counsel arrived, face pale, voice tense. That was when Ethan heard the words that shattered his certainty. "Daniel moved the funds." Ethan stared at him. "What do you mean, move the funds?" "He transferred assets, redirected accounts, signed authority you granted years ago." The room fell silent. Betrayal didn't arrive loudly. It arrived with paperwork. Ethan felt anger surge through him. Not fear, not sadness, rage. "That's impossible," he snapped. "Daniel would never." But the evidence was undeniable. Contracts, signatures, transactions. Daniel hadn't just betrayed him. He had outplayed him. As the hours passed, the truth became heavier. Millions were gone. Control was lost. And the systems Ethan trusted had turned against him. Media outlets began calling. Rumors spread online. Stock prices trembled. The empire that once symbolized power now stood exposed. Ethan sat alone in his office, staring at the city he once ruled. This time, the view didn't make him feel powerful. It made him feel small. For the first time, Ethan felt something he had avoided his entire life. Helplessness. Money couldn't fix this. Influence couldn't erase it. Confidence couldn't deny it. His phone buzzed again. A final message from Daniel. Short, cold, it's just business. Ethan stared at the screen as something inside him broke. That evening, Ethan left the office without saying goodbye to anyone. No victory, no applause, no control, just silence. As he stepped into the city streets, surrounded by people who had no idea his world was collapsing, Ethan realized a painful truth. Success had taught him how to build. Loss was about to teach him who he really was. After the collapse, the world didn't end. It simply went quiet. Ethan Cross expected chaos. Lawsuits, headlines, confrontation. Instead, what followed was something far more unsettling. Silence. The phone that once rang endlessly now sat still. Emails stopped coming. Meetings vanished from his calendar. People who once needed his approval no longer needed his presence. For the first time in his life, Ethan had nowhere he was urgently needed. At first, he told himself it was temporary. "I'll fix this," he whispered to an empty room. But days turned into weeks, and the silence remained. Ethan spent most of his time alone in his once luxurious home. The same walls that once symbolized success now echoed with emptiness. The dining table sat untouched. The rooms felt larger than they should. Without meetings to rush to or decisions to dominate, Ethan was left alone with his thoughts, and they were louder than any boardroom. He replayed every choice he had made, the trust he gave too easily, the people he dismissed too quickly, the warning signs he ignored because success had made him arrogant. For years, he had believed control was strength. Now, stripped of it, he realized how fragile that belief was. One evening, Ethan sat by the window as daylight faded. The city moved on without him. Cars passed. Lights turned on. Life continued. And for the first time, Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not fear, regret, not for losing money, but for losing himself in the pursuit of it. With nothing left to prove, Ethan faced a question he had avoided his entire life. Who am I without success? He had no answer. And that realization frightened him more than bankruptcy ever could. But in the quiet, something unexpected happened. The silence didn't just expose his emptiness, it gave him space. Space to listen, space to reflect, space to begin again. After weeks of silence, Ethan Cross finally realized something profound. Loss doesn't just take it teaches. The emptiness of his mansion, the collapse of his empire, the betrayal he endured, all of it had stripped him down to a man he had avoided facing for years. He wasn't a billionaire anymore. He wasn't powerful. And he certainly wasn't invincible. But he was still alive. And that was enough to begin. Ethan started small. He went out into the city, not to meet investors or close deals, but to observe life as it was. He watched people working hard, helping one another, and finding joy in small victories. For the first time, he noticed what wealth couldn't buy: gratitude, humility, human connection. He began volunteering at a local community center. The children, the elderly, the people with almost nothing, they didn't care who he used to be. They only responded to presence, empathy, and action. Every smile, every simple thank you awakened something in Ethan that no stock market gain ever could. He realized true wealth isn't in numbers, it's an impact. Ethan also revisited friendships he had neglected. He apologized to those he had taken for granted. He rebuilt bridges he had burned in pursuit of control and perfection. Success had taught him how to gain. Loss was teaching him how to live. Weeks turned into months. Ethan began rebuilding, not his empire, but himself. Each day, he measured life differently, by moments of kindness, by lessons learned from mistakes, by gratitude for small joys. For the first time, he felt whole. And the irony was clear: he had lost everything, only to gain what really mattered. True wealth isn't in what you own. It's in who you become when everything you thought mattered is gone. Ethan Cross had walked through the fire. Betrayal, loss, and silence had stripped him bare. But in losing everything, he had found something far greater: himself. He returned to the city, not as a billionaire chasing deals, but as a man seeking purpose. Each step was deliberate, thoughtful, and rooted in the lessons he had learned. That money can vanish, but character remains. That power without empathy is empty. That gratitude transforms despair into strength. Ethan dedicated himself to projects that mattered, not just profits. He funded community programs, rebuilt schools, and mentored young entrepreneurs, not for recognition, but for impact. He reconnected with those he had ignored: family, old friends, even colleagues he had once dismissed. The apologies came easily because he no longer cared about pride, only truth. One evening, standing in a small auditorium filled with people whose lives he had touched, Ethan realized something extraordinary. I once believed wealth defined me. Now I know it is wisdom, integrity, and connection that define a life worth living. The applause that filled the room was nothing compared to the quiet satisfaction in his heart. He had rebuilt an empire of influence, yes, but more importantly, he had rebuilt himself, and that he understood was the greatest legacy any man could leave. True wealth is not measured in dollars, accolades, or power. It is measured in the lives you change, the wisdom you gain, and the gratitude you carry. Ethan Cross went to sleep a billionaire. By morning, his world would begin to fall apart. Ethan Cross had lost his empire. Now he would face something even harder: life without the identity money gave him. When the noise ended, the silence taught him more than wealth ever could. Ethan Cross had rebuilt his life, not with money or power, but with wisdom and purpose. He had lost everything, and in that loss, he discovered the legacy that would endure forever. Welcome echoes of wisdom. Kindly like, share, and follow for more.